She moved through the wreckage with the slow precision of someone who'd done it too many times. Every footstep over the snow-drifted concrete threatened to echo too loud, trigger something buried, or uncover someone she didn't want to see again. The outpost had fallen hard, without warning. The outer wall still bore the scorch marks from the artillery blasts, blackened steel, cracked cement, and remnants of the once blue banners that marked the 7th Field Medical Unit. Aria passed by the medic tent. It had collapsed inward days ago, but she still hesitated at the flap, ducking inside out of reflex. Her gloved fingers traced along the old triage board, now snapped in half and smeared with dried blood. Most of the names had been wiped away by the snow or time. She didn't need to read them, she knew them all. She pushed deeper into the site, stepping over overturned supply crates and shattered IV stands. The quiet was maddening. Not peaceful, dead. Like the world had stopped turning and just hadn't gotten around to telling her yet. Inside the command shelter, she opened one of the lockers and pulled out what little was left. 3 doses of morphine, a cracked pair of trauma shears, and a single ration bar. She ate it slowly, not because she was conserving, but because she couldn't remember the last time she tasted anything other than iron. The only thing still intact was the field radio, scorched, rusted, the antenna snapped at the base. She had tried to fix it the first few days. Took it apart, rewired what she could, but never got so much as a heartbeat of static. Eventually, she stopped trying. Until yesterday. That was when the voice first came through. Just her name. She had been half asleep, the radio turned off when the whisper had reached her. At first, she thought it was a dream. It had to be. But then it came again. Only this time, she was awake, staring at the dead radio as it buzzed to life for just a second. One word. Aria. No rank, no call sign. Just her name. Like whoever was on the other end knew her and knew she was listening. Now, sitting across from the unit again, her tools scattered across her lap, she went back to work. The wires were frayed, insulation stripped. The circuit board was cracked. She soldered together what she could, using heat from a jury-rigged alcohol burner. It wasn't protocol, it was desperation. Her hands shook. Hunger. Cold. The creeping edge of fear she refused to name. She turned the dial again. Static. A long stretch of nothing. Then, Aria. She flinched. The voice was clearer this time. Still faint, but unmistakable. Male. Calm. Almost gentle. Her eyes scanned the room. There was no one. Just her and the ghosts she hadn't buried. She reached for the mic, hesitated, then spoke. "This is Lieutenant Vance. Who's transmitting?" Silence. She tried again. The wind howled through the broken hull of the outpost, carrying with it the scent of blood, rust, and the sharp sting of cold. Snow fell in heavy sheets, half burying shattered helmets and spent casings. Lieutenant Aria Vance crouched beneath a torn awning, her breath ragged, her bandages soaked through. The others were gone, lost in the chaos 2 weeks ago. She hadn't heard a voice since, until tonight. The old radio, long silent, crackled to life. A burst of static, then a whisper. Her name. Just her name, spoken slowly, deliberately. Aria froze. The voice wasn't hers, and it wasn't alone. "Repeat. This is Lieutenant Aria Vance of the 7th Field Medical." The radio snapped off. No power. Dead. As if it had never turned on at all. She stared at it. Breath caught in her throat, then slowly turned her gaze toward the jagged hole in the far wall of the shelter. The wind blew in through it, carrying with it the faintest sound. Not just static. Footsteps. She wasn't alone. The morning came in dull gray, with no sun and no warmth, just light enough to see the breath in front of her face. Aria moved through the ruins of the southern quadrant, the lower levels of the base where the transport carriers had once been parked. All that remained were twisted beams, a burned-out medevac, and the faint scent of diesel clinging to the concrete. She was looking for signs. Anything she might have missed. The voice on the radio could have come from a looped signal, a misfire from an old comms tower, or something else. She didn't like that last possibility, but she'd stopped lying to herself a long time ago. In the debris, she found the first one. A helmet, cracked down the middle. The visor shattered. A medic tag still visible under the grime. She turned it over and read the ID etched inside. Corpsman A. Teles. She exhaled sharply through her nose. Teles had been the youngest. Barely 20. Always cracking jokes during downtime. Always humming old songs when stitching up soldiers. She remembered the last time she saw him, dragging a stretcher through gunfire, yelling something she didn't catch. She never found his body. Until now. She crouched down, brushing snow off the ground. No body here either, just the helmet and a trail. Boot prints, half filled with snow, but fresh enough to follow. Someone had been here. Recently. She followed the tracks into the storage wing, or what was left of it. Most of the corridor had collapsed. Ceiling panels dangled like dead skin, and water dripped from exposed pipes, echoing in the silence. Halfway through the hallway, she spotted the second clue. A field journal. It was torn at the binding, the cover soaked and frozen stiff. But inside, most of the pages were still readable. Scrawled notes, medical reports, coordinates. And then, a few pages in, a single entry written hastily. Saw movement on ridge. Think it was Mara, can't confirm. Radio crackled, heard Aria's name, will investigate. If you find this, head north, keep your eyes open. She read the page again. Mara. Her sister. Captain Aria Vance had led the 7th unit before everything went sideways. Aria remembered the last fight, the retreat, the screaming. Mara had been cut off, holding the rear with a small team. Aria never saw her again. She gripped the journal tighter, her heartbeat slamming against her ribs. It could have been a trick, a hallucination. But the handwriting was real. The boot prints were real. The voice on the radio was real. She moved faster now, sweeping the area for anything she'd missed before. In the remains of the comms room, she found the second black box, one of the portable recorders used by field officers. It was dented, but the playback still worked. She plugged in her headset, turned the dial, and listened. Static. Then a voice. We're falling back to grid 29. No contact with command. If Mara's alive, she'll head there. Vance, if you're hearing this, don't come alone. Something's wrong with the signal. Then silence. She played it again. Then a third time. Each word burned deeper into her spine. She looked over the map, pulled from the wall, stained and half burned. Grid 29 was well outside the safe perimeter, deep in the red zone. The area was considered hostile, unstable. No comms, no recovery. And now, the only trail left. She packed her gear, her fingers numb and stiff. Morphine, gauze, what food she had left. She folded the journal, tucked it into her chest plate, and slung her rifle across her back. Not for fighting, but for mercy. She couldn't afford to find someone half dead and unequipped to help. As she stepped outside, the wind picked up again. Snow curled around her legs. Clouds hung low and angry. Then the radio, hanging from her hip, crackled again. A burst of static. Follow the trail. The voice was different this time. Still male. Still familiar. But deeper, slower. She froze. Who is this? She said, lifting the receiver. No answer. Just one more whisper. North. She stared out across the ridge, past the barbed wire and rusted machine gun nests, toward the distant tree line, choked in frost and silence. She didn't hesitate. The cold bit deep as Aria tightened the straps on her pack, the weight of supplies and memories settling onto her shoulders. The map lay folded in her gloved hands, its edges worn and stained. Grid 29 was far beyond the outpost's perimeter, a stretch marked in red on every chart she'd ever seen, off-limits, irradiated, and whispered about in grim warnings. She swallowed hard and began walking. The first hours were a slow crawl through broken earth and twisted metal. Each step sank into frozen mud or cracked concrete, the ground scarred by fire and explosion. The sky above was a flat, angry gray, heavy with the threat of snow. Silence pressed against her ears like a weight, broken only by the crunch of boots on ice and the occasional distant crack of collapsing debris. Her breath came out in white puffs as she moved through the skeletal remains of a ruined supply depot. The shelves, once stocked with medical kits and rations, were bare and splintered. She ran her fingers over a dented first aid kit, the faded emblem barely visible beneath layers of dust and rust. It was here she paused, pressing her palm to the cold metal, drawing strength from the memory of what it once meant: hope, rescue, survival. The radio, clipped to her belt, remained silent. Hours passed as the landscape shifted from industrial wasteland to the edge of a dense pine forest. Snow fell heavier now, settling in thick layers on branches and dead undergrowth. The world was muted beneath the blanket of white, and the wind carried a biting chill that gnawed at exposed skin. Aria wrapped her scarf tighter, eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. Her thoughts drifted back to Mara, the sister she hadn't spoken to in months before deployment, the woman who had led their unit with fierce determination. The last message in the journal echoed in her mind: "If you find this, head north. Keep your eyes open." She pressed forward, the forest closing in, branches scraping at her gear like fingernails on glass. The trees grew taller, their trunks thick with ice and frost, creating a natural tunnel she followed with cautious steps. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life again. "Aria!" The voice was softer this time, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. She stopped, heart hammering. "Who is this? Show yourself." Only static answered. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the radio's tuner, adjusting the frequency. A faint signal flickered through the noise, a series of beeps, rhythmic and deliberate. She recognized the pattern. It was a code, a heartbeat. The signal was close. With renewed determination, Aria pushed deeper into the forest, following the invisible thread woven through the static. The trees gave way to a clearing, the ground uneven and scarred with craters. At its center stood a broken watchtower, its metal frame bent and rusted, leaning like a wounded sentinel. She climbed carefully, every creak and groan of the structure echoing in the silent air. At the top, the radio antenna hung at a crooked angle, wires frayed but still connected to a battered transmitter. Aria knelt and began repairing the device, soldering loose connections with shaking hands. As she worked, her thoughts raced. Was this the source of the voice? Was someone really out there, waiting? Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the radio crackled again, this time clearer. Aria followed the signal. Trust no one. The warning sent a chill deeper than the cold ever could. She glanced around the treetops, her senses sharp. The journey was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, Aria had a direction. The wind tore through the trees as Aria descended from the watchtower, her legs stiff and aching from the climb. The forest had grown colder, the snow heavier, blanketing everything in a crushing silence. Each step forward felt like moving through a dream, one where the edges were frayed and the dangers unseen. She wrapped her coat tighter around her thin frame, the chill seeping through even the layers she wore. Her eyes caught movement in the underbrush, a small, trembling figure, a dog, mangy and thin, emerged cautiously from the shadows, its ribs pressed sharply beneath a patchy coat, eyes wide with fear and hunger. For a moment, Aria hesitated. Trust was a luxury she no longer possessed. But the dog limped forward, tail low but wagging ever so slightly. She knelt, pulling out a scrap of dried meat from her pack, and extended her hand. The dog sniffed, then took the offering with gentle teeth. It didn't leave. It followed her silently as she pressed onward, a quiet companion in the frozen wasteland. The terrain became more treacherous. The ground beneath her boots shifted unpredictably, soft patches of snow hiding deeper traps. She spotted the remains of enemy drones scattered like broken insects, their once gleaming bodies now twisted metal, shards of glass reflecting the pale light. A sudden crack echoed through the trees. Aria froze, senses sharpening. Something was nearby, watching. She raised her rifle, scanning the shadows. The dog growled softly, alert but wary. She moved carefully, her breath steady despite the pounding in her chest. There was no one in sight, just the restless forest holding its secrets close. She pushed forward, following the map coordinates scrawled hastily in Mara's journal. Hours later, she reached the edge of a frozen creek, its surface cracked and fragile. Crossing was risky, but the radio signal grew stronger here. As she stepped onto the ice, it groaned beneath her weight. Midway across, the ice shattered with a deafening crack. Cold water surged around her legs as she fell through, gasping, fighting to pull herself free. The dog barked and scrambled to the shore, barking frantically. Aria hauled herself out, shivering violently. The cold bit through her clothes and soaked her to the bone. For a moment, she considered turning back. Too dangerous, too far. But the voice on the radio had been clear. Someone was out here, alive. She pressed on, numb fingers fumbling with her pack as she looked for shelter. At last, among the trees, she found a collapsed communications tower, its metal twisted and bent but still standing tall against the snow. Inside the base of the tower, remnants of a makeshift camp remained, empty cans, discarded rations, and a faded cloth marker tied to a broken pole. It bore her name, scrawled hastily with charcoal. Aria. Her breath caught. Someone had been here. Someone had been searching for her. The dog sniffed around the perimeter, alert to sounds beyond human hearing. Aria's gaze swept the area, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The radio crackled once more. "You're close. Keep moving." She nodded, as if the voice could see her. She tightened her grip on her rifle, slung the journal close, and stepped back into the storm. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer alone. The forest had grown quieter, the wind falling away into an eerie stillness. Aria moved cautiously, her every step careful, eyes scanning for the smallest sign of movement. The snow beneath her boots muffled her passage, but the weight of the silence pressed in like a living thing. Her breath came in shallow bursts, fogging in the cold air as she followed the faint trail the radio had guided her toward. The dog padded silently beside her, alert and watchful. It had settled into a steady rhythm, its presence a small comfort amid the vast loneliness. Ahead, she spotted something carved into a tree trunk, an improvised marker, a crude arrow pointing north, with her name scrawled beneath it in hurried, uneven letters. Her pulse quickened. Someone had been here recently, moving through these woods, leaving signs for her to find. She followed the arrows, weaving through dense thickets and fallen branches. At times, she caught glimpses of other markers, strips of fabric tied to trees, scratched symbols on rocks, all bearing her name or a familiar insignia from the 7th Unit. It was as if an unseen hand was guiding her forward, lighting a path through the wilderness. Memories surfaced unbidden. Mara's steady voice in briefings, her fierce determination, the way she'd rallied their unit through impossible odds. The last words in the journal echoed again, urging her northward. Aria paused at a clearing and scanned the horizon. There, beyond the trees, lay the faint outlines of ruined buildings half swallowed by snow. The remnants of an old settlement, abandoned long ago but now possibly a waypoint on this desperate journey. She approached cautiously, rifle raised, every sense alert. In the shadows of a collapsed wall, she spotted fresh footprints, barely faded in the snow. They led deeper into the ruins. Then she saw the name again, carved into a wooden beam. Mara. Her heart clenched, torn between hope and fear. A sudden noise startled her, a soft rustling behind the crumbled structures. She spun, but there was no one. Only the cold wind teasing the broken walls. Her radio crackled, a whisper on the edge of static. "They're waiting. Be careful." She tightened her grip on the rifle, eyes sharp. The warning felt real, heavy with meaning. Aria pressed on, moving cautiously through the ruins, finding more signs of others who had passed this way. Notes scribbled on scraps of paper, left behind like breadcrumbs, spoke of others, survivors, medics, soldiers. Some lost, some hoping to find her. Each message carried fragments of stories, warnings, desperate pleas for help. She pieced them together, the picture growing clearer but darker. Her unit had been scattered, some captured, others killed or missing. But some had believed she was dead. They'd set out to find her, leaving traces that now led her deeper into the unknown. At the edge of the settlement, she found a worn jacket pinned to a tree. The insignia was familiar, a medic's patch, torn but recognizable. Beneath it, a note hastily scrawled, "Trust no one, they're watching, Mara." Aria's breath hitched, the name lingered like a ghost between the words. She stared into the empty windows of the ruined buildings, wondering who they were and if Mara was still alive or lost to whatever shadow haunted this place. The dog growled low, ears flattened, sensing the change in the air. Aria looked around, tension tightening her chest. The silence was no longer empty. It was waiting. NHER radio whispered again, barely audible. "The path isn't safe. Keep moving." NSHE swallowed hard, steeling herself. The trail was winding, the danger real, but turning back was not an option. She was getting closer, and whatever waited ahead, she was ready. Night had fallen, swallowing the ruins in thick shadows that clung to every broken corner and crumbling wall. The cold deepened, seeping through Aria's layers and settling in her bones like an unwelcome guest. She crouched behind a fractured concrete slab, breath visible in the frigid air, eyes darting across the clearing, where faint shapes moved just beyond her vision. The radio crackled softly at her side, the voice she'd come to trust barely audible over the static. "They're close, don't trust the shadows." Her fingers tightened around her rifle. She scanned the darkness, every muscle taut. Footsteps echoed softly, too careful to be casual, too deliberate to be accidental. Movement flickered near the edge of the clearing. A figure, crouched low, watching. Aria's pulse spiked. She aimed, willing herself to stay calm. "Wait," the figure whispered, voice hoarse but familiar. Aria hesitated, searching the face emerging from the gloom. Then recognition hit like a thunderclap. Mara, NHER's sister, stepped forward slowly, eyes wary but alive, face streaked with grime and fatigue. She was thinner, harder than Aria remembered, but unmistakably her. "Took you long enough," Mara said, a faint, bitter smile touching her lips. "Where have you been?" Aria whispered, voice cracking with relief and disbelief. "Surviving, hiding, fighting. This place isn't what it was. Not anymore." Mara gestured toward the ruins around them. "There are things out here, things that don't want us to leave. Or to talk." The radio voices? Some of them are traps, others are warnings. Aria's eyes narrowed. Who's they? Who's watching us? Mara's expression darkened. "We don't know, but they control the signal, the paths, the air we breathe. We've lost more than half our unit. Some went mad, others disappeared." A sudden noise cut through the tension, a twig snapping. Both sisters turned sharply, weapons raised. From the shadows stepped a small group, wary, armed, faces unreadable in the gloom. Mara tensed but lowered her rifle slightly. "Friends," one said, stepping forward slowly. "We've been tracking you. The radio calls, we want to help." Aria studied them carefully. The cold and fear sharpened her instincts. This was no rescue mission. It was a trap waiting to snap shut. "Help?" she echoed. Or bait? Mara's gaze met hers. We decide, together. The group's leader nodded, offering a tentative smile. There's a safe place, a haven. But it's far, and the way is dangerous. You'll need us. Aria's mind raced. Trust was scarce, hope scarcer. But after weeks of isolation, the prospect of allies was intoxicating. She glanced at Mara, whose steady nod gave her the courage to lower her weapon. We follow, Aria said, but we watch every step. The radio crackled one last time before falling silent. The voice was gone. Whatever awaited them beyond the ruins was unknown. But together, the sisters moved forward, into the darkness, toward uncertain salvation. The small group moved cautiously through the frozen forest, shadows stretching long under the pale moonlight. Aria stayed close to Mara, her eyes constantly scanning the darkness, alert to every sound. The others followed behind, their breaths visible in the cold night air, their footsteps soft but purposeful. The path was treacherous, twisted roots hidden beneath snow, sudden drops covered by ice, and the ever-present sense of being watched. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to break the silence. Mara's voice was low but steady as she spoke to the group. We're close to the safe house. Just a little further. Aria's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and doubt. Safe house. The word felt fragile against the harsh landscape, like a whisper against a storm. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the quiet. Everyone froze. Aria's rifle was up in an instant, eyes searching the darkness. A figure burst from the shadows, moving fast and desperate. Hold! Mara shouted, stepping forward. The figure stumbled into the light. A young man, ragged and breathless, eyes wild with fear. They're coming, he gasped. You have to move, now. Panic rippled through the group, but Mara kept her composure. Who's coming? She demanded. Hunters. They track the radio signals. They'll kill anyone who listens, the man replied, shivering. Aria's grip tightened on her rifle. The danger was closer than she feared. Move! Mara commanded. The group broke into a run, weaving through the trees, branches slapping at faces and gear. The snow underfoot slowed them, but the promise of safety pushed them forward. After what felt like hours, they reached a weathered cabin nestled in a clearing, its windows dark but intact. Mara knocked sharply, then stepped back, weapon raised. The door creaked open, revealing an older woman with sharp eyes and a steady gaze. You made it, she said simply. Inside, the warmth was immediate. A crackling fire, the scent of wood smoke, and the quiet hum of life. Aria sank down, exhaustion washing over her. The woman introduced herself as Elise, caretaker of the safe house and guardian of those who survived. She handed Aria a cup of warm tea, the bitterness grounding her. Mara pulled Aria aside. We're not safe yet. They control everything out there. But here, we can regroup, plan, and maybe, just maybe, fight back. Aria nodded, the weight of the journey settling into a fragile hope. The radio's voice was silent for now. But the fight was far from over. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the echo of a name. Her name, whispered on the cold air. The safe house was a small fortress amid the endless white, its walls weathered but sturdy against the biting cold. Inside, Aria sat by the fire, the warmth sinking slowly into her frozen limbs. The tea she cradled was dark and strong, its bitterness grounding her to the moment. Outside, the wind rattled the windows like a restless ghost, reminding her of everything waiting beyond these walls. Mara paced quietly, hands clenched, her mind racing through plans and possibilities. We can't stay here long, she said softly. They'll trace the signal eventually. We need to move before they find us. Aria nodded, already thinking ahead. Supplies were limited, and the group had only a fragile window before the hunters closed in. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't dared to before: hope. Elise entered, carrying a bundle of maps and supplies. "There's a route through the valley," she explained. "Dangerous, but it might get you out of their range. You'll need every advantage." Mara studied the maps, tracing lines with a finger. "It's risky, but staying still is worse." The room fell silent as the weight of their choices pressed down on them. Aria looked around at the weary faces. Survivors, fighters, all clinging to the thread of hope she now shared. Later, as the fire dimmed to glowing embers, Aria sat alone, radio in hand. The silence was thick, but then, faintly, a crackle broke through. "Aria, it's time." Her heart raced. The voice was familiar, urgent. She turned to Mara, who nodded grimly. "We move at dawn." Outside, the first light crept over the horizon, casting pale gold across the snow. Aria stood, ready to face whatever came next. This journey was far from over, but she was no longer the only medic left alive. She was the spark of resistance, and she would not be silenced. The dawn broke cold and gray, the sky heavy with low clouds that promised more snow. Aria tightened the straps on her pack, every movement slow but purposeful. Mara stood beside her, eyes sharp and steady, while Elise and the others prepared quietly around the safe house. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them all, but no one spoke of fear. As they stepped out into the pale morning light, the forest greeted them with silence, the snow crunching beneath their boots the only sound. The path ahead was treacherous, a narrow trail winding through steep ravines and dense thickets. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the stillness. Aria's breath came in steady puffs as she led the group, rifle ready and senses alert. The dog padded alongside her, unwavering and watchful. Mara followed close behind, map in hand, eyes constantly scanning. Hours passed like this, the cold gnawing at exposed skin, fatigue settling into muscles. The radio remained quiet, the voice that had guided her so far now silent, replaced by the crunch of footsteps and the whisper of wind. Then, just as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the snow, the silence shattered. A sudden burst of gunfire echoed through the valley, sharp and unforgiving. "Ambush!" Mara shouted, diving for cover. Aria's heart hammered as she dropped behind a fallen tree, returning fire instinctively. Figures emerged from the tree line, masked, armed, relentless. The hunters had found them. The battle was fierce but brief. Aria moved with practiced precision, protecting the group and providing aid where needed. Bullets tore through the air, shouts and curses mingling with the storm's howl. When the dust settled, silence reclaimed the valley. Some were down, others shaken but alive. The hunters had retreated, but the cost was clear. Mara knelt beside a fallen comrade, eyes burning with grief. Aria's hands shook as she bandaged wounds, the urgency of survival pushing through the exhaustion. "We can't stop," Mara said quietly, voice steady despite the pain. "Not yet." Aria looked up, meeting her sister's gaze. They were battered, but unbroken. Together, they pushed forward into the gathering night, driven by a single truth. She was still alive, still fighting, and the radio crackled once more, breaking the darkness with a familiar, haunting voice. "Aria, you're not alone." Hope, fragile but fierce, burned anew in the cold. The night was quiet now, the distant echoes of battle fading into the cold air. Aria sat beside the dying embers of the fire, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. Around her, the survivors tended to their wounds, their faces marked by exhaustion and determination. The journey had been brutal, longer and harsher than she could have imagined. But she was here, alive, and not alone. Her radio, once a lifeline of hope and mystery, lay silent for now, yet its crackling voice still echoed in her mind, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection could be found. The name that called her through the static was no longer just a signal. It was a beacon of resilience, a call to keep moving forward. Aria glanced at Mara, whose steady presence had been her anchor through the chaos. Together they had faced the wilderness, the silence, and the shadows hunting them. And together they would keep fighting, not just for survival, but for the future. This was more than a story of being the last medic alive. It was a testament to hope, to courage, and to the unyielding will to endure. No matter the odds, Aria's name would live on, carried on the radio waves, echoing in the hearts of those who refused to give up. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.